Grayson's grades posted at 973ESPN.com. Scott, how are you, man?
I am just living the traveler's dream, Mike. How are you?
I imagine a long route home there. But let me ask you to start things off. We had you on yesterday morning, bright and early, to kick off the Countdown to Kickoff show, and you had mentioned the amount of Eagles fans. It sounded as if it was more of an Eagle home game was on television. Was that accurate?
Yeah, especially down at the one end where they came onto the field. That's where the largest concentration of Eagles fans seemed to be. But it was definitely – I mean, I had that feeling when I was walking around London on Saturday at the different sites. I told you there was a Fly Eagles Fly rendition done right outside the gates of Buckingham Palace by some fans. So they were all over, and I was not surprised to hear the noise that was in the stadium. I don't think the Eagles players were really that surprised either. They did appreciate it, made them feel more at home, and it probably made the Jaguars feel a little less at home as a result. But, I think it was definitely impressive the way they turned out.
All right, so yesterday, what was – I don't want to say different, but – did that game have a different feel afterwards? There's so many weeks where you come on in the locker room and you're like, they seemed stunned, they seemed surprised. Was it like a sense of like, thank God, or what was the mood afterwards?
Honest to God, Mike, I think, and I wasn't the only one I heard talking about this after the game that felt this way, but when we walked into the locker room, you take a step in there, music's blasting, guys are dancing, huge smiles on their face. And they finally toned it down as the media was coming in so we could talk to them, and everything we got would be recorded well enough that we could make it out. But, it was probably, in my mind, the happiest, the most relieved, the most excited they were in that locker room since winning the Super Bowl. And I think that says a lot about what this win meant to them. Fletcher Cox told me, he says, I hate to say this, but in my mind, this was a must-win. So that gives you the level of importance here. Going into the bye at 4-4 versus 3-5 is extremely huge, even though it's only one win. But it makes a big difference as they look at the second half of the season now.
You wrote about it at 973ESPN.com about they called this win huge. Did they feel like this is a good time to kind of get away? Or would they rather, that feeling of we got to win, we feel good about it. Is this a good time for this bye?
It's a great time for this bye, largely because you see the injury report every week, and it's got a ton of names on it of guys who had limited participation in practice or didn't participate. So they need to heal some bumps and bruises in a big way. Now, whether 1 week's going to be enough time to do much of that, we'll have to see. But I think it comes at a great time for them to kind of refocus on all that stuff, as well as to come off with this win, to kind of look at the rest of the season where it's got a lot of NFC East opponents that they know they control their own destiny regarding all that. And I just think that the way they won that game, too, it's almost like I could see a monkey running down the hall because it came off their back having to be able to win a game in a fourth quarter. It was almost eerie the way that it was kind of starting to feel like the Carolina game a little bit when it got to 17-15. And they were able to finish it off. Fourth down stop, offense ran out the clock. I think that really made them feel good about being able to finish the game.
It's funny you say that real quick because I tweeted out yesterday the number 17 has not been a good number for them. And then when Jacksonville scored, I was like, here we go again.
Yep. I had to say, I think I sent out a very similar tweet. Like, they need to get off 17 because they've been stuck on that for a while in that game. And obviously the one before, that's where they ended.
Hey, Scott, it's Jeff. So one of my observations coming out of this game is that going forward, it's pretty clear to me that Doug is so obviously much more confident in Carson Wentz throwing than any of the running backs running, that it's going to be 65 to 70% through the air, first three quarters, maybe even longer for the rest of the year. And the way Carson's playing right now, I kind of understand why Doug feels that way. And I wonder if you feel like it's sustainable as long as they're not turning the ball over. Or do you think that it's hard to do without turning the ball over?
Oh, it's really hard to do without turning the ball over. They got lucky yesterday. They turned it over twice.
Mm-hmm.
But, and the Jaguars didn't do much with it, which was the fortunate thing for the Eagles. But, I heard you guys talking about the poll question you had, and, Jeff, I completely agree with you. I think they have good complementary backs on this team right now, but they don't have a guy who the opponent is going to have to sit there and feel like they have to, keep accountable and know where he is on the field. When they hand it off, they kind of, they're not too worried about somebody, one of those three guys, breaking one. I think that's missing from this offense. You could also say it's really missing a deep threat that could maybe make the holes a little bigger for these guys to hit and perhaps get more yards, and then you are okay with them So I think there's a couple of ways how he could try to do this thing if he wants to, but they're just lacking that guy, I think, that makes Doug feel like he can run the ball when he needs to. He's very happy to let Carson have it. I think what we're seeing, too, is Carson's mental clock coming back into play. He's getting out of the pocket at the right time. He's extending the plays well. I really thought Doug did a good job of going to rollouts when they were getting a lot of pressure and batted balls at the line of scrimmage to give Carson windows to throw through. So, yeah, I mean, they're putting this on Carson's arm and in his head and his decisions at the line of scrimmage, and we'll see how far that can take him.
And that's what's different from last year. I mean, it was always about Carson Wentz last year, no doubt about it. Defense was a little bit more ball hawking, so that helped the offense. But the biggest difference to me is last year when they were struggling at times, like the first game against Dallas, right? Rough first half. What's he come? He comes out of the locker room and Doug gives the ball to Jay Ajayi, and they don't have prolific running backs enough for Doug to say, I'm going to coach it into him or I'm going to scheme it into him. He's just basically saying, I'm going to sprinkle him in and ride Carson the rest of the way.
Yeah, and it just, when you asked before about whether it's I just don't think it's going to be sustainable, especially when you look at the opponents they have, like an LA Rams defense. I just don't think that's anything that's going to be sustainable against that team. I just think obviously their second half of their schedule is going to be more difficult than the first half, I think, and I think it's just not sustainable to try to do that as much as they are. They've got to at some point be able to, get that play action, at least something that the opponent has to pause for a breath and take a look at and see if it was handed off, and that's not in the offense right now.
It's interesting. They ran the ball yesterday you take 6 out from Wentz. So they ran it 22 times for about 105 yards, about that. Adams had 9 for 61, Smallwood 8 for 24, Clement 4 for 6, and then you got 1 for 14 from Aguilar. So really, they didn't run the ball all as well as it seems like they did. You know what I mean? So when you were just saying when they were struggling, it seemed that Wentz got them out to a lead, and then Blunt finished them off. That's where I think they're struggling. They're getting to 17. They can't finish the game out, and they almost went down that road yesterday. So now you're asking Wentz to get you the lead and then close it out. You're asking your starting pitcher to also be your closer. It's a tough ask. So do you think, Scott, that Adams showed enough yesterday that if they don't make a trade, that he will, in fact, be the guy?
Well, it seems like you could pinpoint a game here, a game there, or another game where it's Clement that did well, or Smallwood, or now Adams. But all three of them, when it gets down to crunch time, like you said, and you used to be able to give it to LeGarrette Blount, these three backs have not mastered the art of covering the ball with two arms when you know that the opponent is trying to rip it out because they know that you're running the ball to run the clock out. And Adams got lucky that his butt cheek jiggled just enough on the replay to make that ball, come back to the Eagles. And I think that's where they're missing. They're missing that guy who can just ground and pound you to the win. And you can feel confident he's going to hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Doug starts getting a little concerned about who can I really give it to late in the fourth quarter when the game's on the line. And that's just something that they've got to figure out. And I don't know that guy's on this roster right now. I like the way Adams ran yesterday, hit the hole well, cut well, even took on some guys and kind of drove the pile forward a little bit. Like a Jay Ajayi sort of. But then at the end with that fumble, it kind of go, whoa, like this is scary.
Yeah. And by the way, you gave Adams an A.
Yes, you gave Adams.
Yeah, because the fumble didn't end up happening. So look, what was his yards per carry average was really good. It was like almost 7 yards per carry or something like that. Yeah, and that's
9 for 61. Yeah, so he's right around there.
Yeah, he had a 21-yarder and a 17-yarder, if I'm not mistaken, which is what this offense has missed. I think they also miss, Josh. I think they miss, and not from a ground and pound standpoint, although Doug seems to love the kid, even though he's short. But Sproles, his pass protection, his ability to be a third down weapon, not a field stretcher, but a mismatch. And then obviously I think he could get some fourth quarter carries and not fumble and knows what to do. They have missed him greatly, I believe.
And you know what? I was saying yesterday, I really think they've missed him immensely on punt returns. DeAndre Carter's trying, but, he's just not breaking anything. Some of his decisions on whether to fair catch or not, or field a ball or not, have been sketchy. I mean, they're missing that veteran, the guy who knows what he's doing back there. And you feel like, and again, I talked about a guy who could break one. You always wonder if you're an opponent, if Sproles could break a punt on you, and you got to be careful about that when you're kicking it to him. Right now with Carter, you just don't have that. So I think that's one area that's really going to get a boost would be punt return for the Eagles when Sproles comes back.
I tell you, the one thing for me that I criticize Doug with, because I don't like finding excuses or to give a coach a pass. I agree, as we all do, that the running game is not good enough, not secure enough, not responsible enough to be trusted. However, as a coach, that to me I don't feel like Doug should just completely abandon it like we saw him do against Carolina, and he really didn't lean on it that much more against the Jags. I would say this: if you have a lead in the fourth quarter and it's more than a possession, and you're a little concerned about getting positive yards, stick an extra offensive lineman out there, stick 2 tight ends with it, come up with really big packages, and ram it down their throat with a Josh Adams who's 220 pounds, and make the yards. Like, you're a coach, you've got your personnel, they're on your team for a reason. Figure out a way to make it work instead of just abandoning it and assuming that if I just throw it a whole lot, I got a better shot of winning this game.
You could definitely do that, and I like the idea, and I think it's something they should explore, as well as then when you've done that a few times, now all of a sudden he loves to consider, these short passes out in the flat to a running back, essentially a running play, and I get that, but when you've done that with Josh Adams a few times, now that becomes a little bit more feasible to be productive, or even a Nelson Aguilar screen, that they like to do sometimes. When you're running it up the middle with, like you said, you load it up, you bring out some extra guys, some extra beef on the line, then that stuff on the flank, and it starts to become a little bit more effective because they have to kind of collapse down and respect the fact that you might end up running it right up. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Doug's not one who's going to, use a lot of excuses, and he kind of has to use what he has. And then at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, look at Howie and say, "This is what you've given me." So it'll be interesting to see how they handle the next 24 hours.
Scott, I know one of the things that you did before covering the Eagles was cover West Virginia football. So a guy like Rasul Douglas.
Who didn't cover West Virginia football here?
Was cover a guy like Rasul Douglas, and I know that yesterday he had a pretty good game, and then after the game apparently was handpicked by Malcolm Jenkins. Do you know Rasul to be that kind of guy? Is he kind of a leader guy? I mean, to see how frustrated it is for him to not be able to play. And then when he is given the opportunity to play, it seems like he steps up and makes plays for this team.
He really does. I mean, he was integral last year in jumping in a backup role and playing well for a few weeks. And, it's interesting you mentioned that, and him and Jenkins, because it was about a month ago, I think, after a home game, I saw Jenkins and Rasul talking for quite a while at Malcolm's locker. And I don't know what it was about. And I'm guessing it's along the lines of Rasul saying something like, "What do I got to do?"
Right.
To get out there. And maybe Malcolm was giving him some advice. But I get the sense Malcolm's taking this kid under his wing a little bit more and really tried to mentor him. And look, Rasul keeps waiting for his turn. When he gets it, to his credit, for the most part, he's coming in cold and doing a pretty good job. And I agree with you. I thought he did a nice job yesterday when they needed him. And it looks like maybe they're going to need him for a little while here. He's a ball hawk. He's always around it. You saw that yesterday. I don't know what it is about him. He has a sixth sense. But he's there, and that's why he, at West Virginia, was able to get a lot of interceptions.
Yeah.
And even last
Led the
year,
nation, right?
went up and took the ball away. I think so. I mean, he went up and then last year he was good at going up and getting the ball at the high point. And unlike some defensive backs that the Eagles have, he was actually catching it for the interception. So, they need some of that. They need more turnovers on defense by far. Look what happened yesterday when they got one. Yeah. They turned it into 7. So,
by the way, you gave the
that's
kid
something this defense needs.
You gave the kid Avonte Maddox an A, but he went to Pitt, so I won't talk about him. No, he played well as well. Scott Grayson was in London. You can read full Grayson's grades right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Safe travel, Scott.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Mike, good to talk to you guys.